be on the recent events where they're tearing down Confederate statues. Actually, they're tearing down pretty much any statue. They even tore down and burned a statue of an elk. So I don't know. They're just tearing down everything. And it has less to do with the reasons that they say in the media. Often they will cite the Confederacy. And they'll say that, they're tearing down these statues of past slave owners and the oppression and stuff like that. But I want to kind of address that Confederate statue issue because I think that's the elephant in the room that really needs to be understood and why we actually need those statues. So this video is really going to be on why do we need the Confederate statues? And I really want people to understand that they actually have a very valid place in American history and in American minds and should be remembered. When the war broke out between the North and the South, it was the leaders who really supported slavery. So these were Democrats in the South who promoted the idea that slavery was, something that needed to be protected. And they were the ones that really wanted to maintain that institution. The northern states, wanted to, maintain the Union. That's why they were called the Union Army. And the southern states were the Confederacy. They wanted to be their own independent nation. And with what most people don't understand is the majority of people in the South didn't have slaves and didn't want slavery, would have been fine with abolishing slavery. And they, however, fought in the war, not because it was to protect slavery, but because it was there to protect the South. Now, a good example of this is actually one of the most famous people for the South, which is General Lee. He was actually against slavery. He freed his own slaves. He did have slaves that he inherited. It's one of those misunderstandings that people have that he never bought slaves. He inherited a farm with slaves, and he then later freed them several years later because of parts of the will that said that he had to wait a few years before freeing them. But he did do so. And he actually did a lot of things like he provided education for a lot of the slaves on his plantation. He did a lot of, things that kind of show that he was not the racist or evil man that they try to portray him as. But he was actually given the opportunity, and it's a rare opportunity, where he could have been general of the Northern Army or general of the Southern Army. They actually gave him that choice. The Northern Army wanted him to be their general, and the Southern Army wanted him to be their general. And General Lee said, well, the South is where my heart is, and he basically chose to fight for the South. And he didn't do so to protect slavery. It had nothing to do with slavery. It had to do with the reason that majority of people in the South fought was to protect their way of life, and not slavery, their way of life and their home. Okay, and what people don't realize is even blacks fought for the South and actually, were doing it for the same reason, that they were protecting their home from this northern invasion. And that's what people don't understand, that when you're protecting your home, you go all out. You're fighting to protect your way of life, your home. You'll go all out, and you will not stop until you are dead. And at the end of the war, when it was obvious that the South was not going to win, General Lee was very aware of this fighting spirit. He was very aware that the South would fight and fight and fight until every last man, woman, and child was dead. And he knew this. He knew this because it was a Southern spirit. Very strong spirit, a spirit that should be actually venerated. And, it's something that you can say these people are very proud and very, very good people in terms of they want to protect their home. And So that was kind of an interesting situation. Well, General Lee knows that these people will fight on, even if he stops. The way it works is he was leader of his army, okay, and there was other armies that also had to surrender. Um, but he could be the one that would bring them to surrender. So if General Lee surrendered, he could say, well, hey, look, I'm going to surrender, but you have to kind of give us some concessions because the rest of them are not going to surrender. So in order to to bring, the end of the war and to make peace a certainty, uh, General Lee basically said that in order to maintain the peace, in order to create a union again, you have to sort of forgive the wrongs of the past. We all have to forgive. Both sides have to forgive, and we have to move on. And one of the things that happened in that was that they basically said, okay, you are forgiven, and you are back to being an American again. So what that meant was part of the reconciliation was this forgiveness of past wrongs, that families could be reunited, the country could be reunited. And they basically said that the heroes of the South were not just heroes of the South anymore. They were American heroes because we're now a unified country. And so part of the movement for these statues to be erected was to really say, hey, look, these aren't just Southern heroes that fought in the Confederacy. They are American heroes. And it's part of our, you know, combined history as a nation that we should remember these people who fought for what they believed would make America a better place. They were fighting for what they believed was the definition of liberty, pursuit of happiness, and all those things. We have to remember them for their sacrifice to the country. Now, if you're a Northerner, you always see them as a traitor, but that was, at the time, it made sense because they were talking about these are American heroes, even though they years later we revise the history and make them traitors. It wasn't that case, and that's what really has to be understood. The funny thing is, all the soldiers were actually pardoned. It wasn't Lincoln that got to pardon them. They were pardoned in 1865 by Stonewall. I want to say Stonewall Jackson, but yeah, Stonewall Jackson. I just had to think about it. Stonewall Jackson pardoned them all at the end of the war. So yeah, yes. So it was one of those things that where all these soldiers were pardoned, and the reason they were pardoned is to say, hey, look, all those things that happened in the war, we're going to forgive that. We're going to move on. And we're going to move on so that we can remain a united country. And if they didn't do that, the war could have raged on forever until, as I said, every woman, man, woman, and child was dead. And nobody wanted that. Okay, so it was very important to understand how significant it was to say, hey, look, we forgive you, and these heroes of the South are American heroes. And to call them traitors now is kind of not to remember that history, that very important history that really forms American history. The Civil War was one of the most crucial things in American history. It really defined the country, even almost more so than the independence, because it was one way of settling what kind of country they are, what kind of country America is. And they settled on this country where liberty and freedom really meant something. It meant that all people within that country would be free. And that was a huge thing. And the fact that they spilled blood to make that, to finalize that, that choice, that freedom was more important than even our lives, that's pretty insane and it's pretty awesome. And it's a piece of American history that shouldn't be forgotten. That's why we have to keep these statues so that we can remember, hey, look, these people fought for what they believed in. They fought for this idea of what they saw America should be. And you might not agree with some of their standpoints, but that's not the point. It's understanding history. And they always say, if you ignore history, if you don't learn from history, that you're destined to repeat it. Well, I see that, that you not only that you're destined to repeat it, there's even a worse thing that can happen where you're destined to not learn from it. And we have to learn from these things. This was like a horrible, horrible thing that happened in America. And if you don't learn that valuable lesson of unity and of like coming together and respecting even your enemies, then you've really lost a valuable lesson. And I really hope that people kind of come to their senses and sort of protect these statues, because that part of American history needs to be protected. And all American history needs to be protected, because the movement now isn't about statues. It's about tearing down America as a country, tearing down everything that represents the country, rewriting their history. And that's not a good way to be. They should almost deport anyone that steps out of line in this. It's really a group of people who are not American. They're not in their own hearts American, because they don't understand what America represents. I mean, I'm Canadian and I appreciate America more than these people do. And what people really don't understand is how important America is for liberty. And if we lose that light within this dark world of ours, that'd be a very sad thing, because there's so many countries out there that are fighting against liberty, fighting against freedom. I even count my own country in that group. We get these leaders who want to regulate and control people, and I think that's a very sad thing. So we have to remember the lessons that people fought for their liberty. They fought for what they believed in. And hopefully we can remain united, in terms of this idea, and remain pro-liberty and pro-history, remembering where we came from and how we got to this point now, where we can live fairly free. So yeah, this has been Socially Triggered. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please share this video so that I get more people watching my videos, because I really do feel that people are missing out on some of these fairly basic ideas that are just not being shared anymore. It seems like common sense isn't common, and I'm trying to bring some of that back to our world. And I hope you can share that with your friends and family and so forth, and maybe bring some common sense back. So thanks for watching.